was superhuman on the basketball court and everywhere else.
One sports writer likened the first sight of Wilt to the first sight of the New York City skyline. It was majestic, whether seen from up close or afar. You just kind of went, wow.
Wilt was a Paul Bunyan figure, mythic in what he could personally do.
He was Goliath, the strongest basketball player that ever lived. The case closed.
He played a game against the Detroit Pistons. In the game, he blocked 26 shots.
On the 55 rebound game, how about that, against Bill Russell?
Wilt won 7 scoring titles. He won 9 shooting titles. He won 11 rebound titles. And then he led the league in assists one year.
When he was in the latter part of his career, the news media or somebody would walk up to him and say, you can't score anymore. 50, 60, then he go back to passing the ball and whatever. And if you challenged him, that just took him to another level in terms of, okay, I'll do this, I'll do that. It's not possible for any human being to do the kinds of things that he was able to do.
In an 80-game season, he played 79 complete games. He missed 8 minutes of one game because it got thrown out. Other than that, he played every moment of every one of those games.
That was inconceivable to us. How the hell do you stay so strong all season? How do you avoid fouling out? How do you take a beating every night with guys pushing you, punching you, grabbing you, and come back the next night fresh as a daisy? How the hell do you do this, Will?
Just one game, 48 minutes a game is really enough, you know, but playing a whole season, 48 minutes a game. I mean, when I look back in retrospect, I said, what were they doing to me? Jesus, there must have been some time when I could have gotten a rest.
50 points a game. That's right. 5-0. 50.
The NBA's all-time team celebration, Cleveland, 1997. And over in the corner is Wilt and Michael Jordan. And they're sitting at a table arguing vociferously as to who the greatest player of all time is. And they're back and forth. And just intense as can be. And so now David Stern comes into the room. And says, okay, guys, time to go. And Michael and Wilt are still going at it at this table over here. And so David finally says, come on, Wilt, Michael, we got to get going. And so they stand up. And Wilt, who always has the last word in everything, Wilt looked down at Michael and said, Michael, just remember, when you played, they changed all the rules to make it easier for you to dominate. When I played, they changed all the rules to make it harder for me. And there was no retort, no comeback. Wilt Chamberlain, oh my gosh.
I'll tell you a great Magic story. I'm a coach at UCLA, and he used to come to the men's gym and organize games.
I remember
there
were a lot of pickup games back then.
All the time, and he used to make the sides and stack them. So one night I'm watching, and Kevin O'Connor in the stands. Wilt Chamberlain's playing with 4 of my freshmen against Magic, Bernard King, James Worthy, Byron Scott, and Green.
AC Green.
AC Green. Huh? And it's game point. Magic throws a sky hook. Wilt blocks it. Magic calls game. And Wilt says, that wasn't goaltending. That was a clean block. And Magic took the ball. He said, game over, next. And Wilt said, hey, coach, was that goaltending? And I said, no, that was a clean block. Magic says, what do you think he's going to say? They're his kids. And Wilt says, all right, look, we're going to play a game till 12. We'll do it again. Winner stays, and there'll be no more shots made at this basket. He blocked everything. Shot. 43 years old. He was blocking everything. It was unbelievable.
Somebody used to play in those 80s games who I asked who's the best player you ever played with or against told me it was about a 50-year-old Wilt Chamberlain at those UCLA pickup games. He was that kind of physical presence.
Chamberlain was another one that I met and trained with. Wilt Chamberlain.
You trained with Wilt Chamberlain?
Yeah, Wilt Chamberlain would be in the gym. We eventually ended up doing a movie together.
Yeah, Conan.
Conan the Destroyer, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I was a big fan of his because he came to the gym and he would do a tricep extension that, like, the big guys, the strongest guys, would do, let's say, 120 pounds, let's say, tricep extension, pulling down, right? He would come and he would do 150, 170 pounds, Wilt Chamberlain. That's how strong he was.
They always said he was by far the strongest person who's ever played in the NBA.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember that he lifted me up like with one arm like nothing.
When he made the moves with Arnold Schwarzenegger, they were in a weight room. And Wilt says, well, how do you do that? And Arnold goes, well, this way you do it. You know, you push up. So he goes, Wilt lays down on the bench, gets up under it. Bing, 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 bing. And Schwarzenegger never came into the weight room with Wilt again.
Wilt was a very special guy. I mean, he was the greatest athlete I think that's ever lived. One of the strongest man that's ever played.
When you said strength, one time in a game, Casey Jones tied him up. He was really upset. And so Wilt Chamberlain picked up the ball with Casey still attached. And he picked it up with his arms extended, brought it to his chest, and threw a two-handed chest pass with Casey still on the ball. That's how strong he was.
I'll tell you a story about Wilt. When the Warriors were breaking camp after their training camp was over, we always had a game between the varsity basketball of Milton Hershey against the Warriors. The Warriors run a play, and I get picked, and now I'm guarding Wilt. In one motion, he picked me up, put the ball through, then set me on top of the basket. And he had a big smile on his face. He was a very strong man, very strong man.
Wilt could do whatever he wanted to on the basketball court. Strong, palmed a bowling ball, a 16-pound bowling ball. Didn't put his fingers in the sockets and the holes, palmed it like that, held it out.
Wilt Chamberlain went up to dunk a ball, and Calvin Murphy jumped on him. And Wilt actually completed the dunk, came down, took Calvin off his back, and put him on the floor. You all right, little fella?
Probably the greatest play I have ever seen in my life. Wilt Chamberlain was involved with Gus Johnson. Wilt was standing there. Gus goes up to dunk it. Wilt catches the ball, throws Gus to the floor. Still holding the ball, they carry Gus off the court with a dislocated shoulder from bouncing off the floor. I don't see how anyone in the NBA will ever be as strong as he was.
I saw Wilt Chamberlain once go to half court and make 20 out of 25 free throws from half court.
You know, Wilt had a great shot outside. He used to win games at horse.
I'm going to tell you something. As bad as you looked, you didn't miss by that much. You just see me make 2 in a row. You know, I had to set boy fast. There you go. I'll give you $5. I just spent the last 3 of them. I don't care. This is the one I'm talking about for $5. Get it up. Get it up.
Everybody was captivated by this giant.
And I actually saw this, and I think to this day people don't believe it. But he wasn't at the top of the circle, but he was about 3 steps behind it on a free throw, and he ran to the free throw line, took off, and dunked the ball.
Wilt Chamberlain was an extraordinary athlete.
What was exciting for me as a kid at 13, 14 years old was to come to his house and see him pick up 350 pounds in a weight. And then see him on the court when he used to just shed guys off of him.
In any sport that Wilt accomplished that many people might not know about. Polo, water polo.
Harness racing.
I water ski at over 100 miles an hour. When I ride my cars, I'm going as much as 180 miles an hour. And most people dream of doing those things, but never have enough nerve to try them.
The Kansas City Chiefs drafted him for tight end.
I know you did a 4.4 and a 40-yard dash.
Yeah,
you were a sprinter, even boxing.
We came with a concept of Wilt Chamberlain fighting Muhammad Ali, and I was going to manage Wilt. You know what happened though? No. Herbert saw Wilt and got afraid and thought it might be an upset because Wilt was so big. You know, Ali was 6'2", and Wilt was about 7'2". Yeah. And so Herbert backed out. And he was a manager of Muhammad.
I don't see how anyone in the NBA will ever be as strong as he was.
Must have been 46 or 47 seconds remaining in the game. People just ran out of the stand just to touch Wilt, just to be there.
I learned a lesson early against Wilt. When I was a rookie, I blocked one of his shots, and he blocked every shot that I took the next 5 times we played them.
Lenny Wilkins cast off a shot that appeared to be 3 feet above the basket, and Wilt jumped up and caught this ball with one hand. The referee called goaltending, and I hollered at him, "How could you call that goaltending?" And he says, "Guy, what I just saw is not humanly possible."
You really can't tell how big he is until you actually see him. I mean, he shook my hand, and my hand disappeared, and I'm just going, I don't believe this.
People don't understand how big he is. He like blocks out the sun. The sense of size in Wilt Chamberlain is the essence of the man. It's just there. You just feel like you're in the presence of some giant.
Wilt was simply, a man-child in a game where it was just simple. He got 55 rebounds in a game.
Wilt averaged 50 points a game for a full season.
Of course. Chamberlain averaged 50 points a game. He probably averaged 75 a game if he were playing today. You know why I say that? Because you can't put your hand on guys. When I played, you could hand check them. Now you can't hand check them. So it's much more difficult to stop players that way.
The reaction to his size and talent was so unsettling that the rules of the game suddenly seemed inadequate.
I think
he was the only guy that could change the landscape in basketball, change the rules. Offensive goaltending, defensive goaltending.
You had to widen the lane. The free throw shooter had to release the ball behind the line. Wilt could take off from the free throw line and dunk the foul shot.
Wilt just forged right through those things. Wilt Chamberlain always judged everyone as an individual.
If you look at his records and the records that he set, I always thought it was like watching him in slow motion. I thought he could have even done more.
If you win, everybody says, well, look at him, he's that big. If you lose, it's, how could he lose a guy that size? I think it's confused him. He would have been better in an individual sport. He'd have been much better just competing for himself.
He went to Bill Easton, the track coach, one time and said, "Coach, I'd like to enter in the high jump." And Bill said, "Well, Wilt," he said, you haven't even practiced." He said, "How could you possibly compete?" He said, "Well, just give me a chance." Wilt won the Big 7 high jump championship with no practice at all.
I saw Wilt Chamberlain run under 2 minutes in the 880 yards. I saw him put the shot over 50 feet.
In the 1950s, big guys were still called goons. There was a sense that they weren't athletes, that they were only in the game because they were tall. There was this natural disposition to see this guy simply as a freak of nature. And no matter what he did on the track and field didn't change that image.
However he may have been perceived, Chamberlain's impact on college basketball proved deep and permanent.
When he came to Kansas, the rumor got out and scared the daylights out of everybody in the country. They said he could stand at the free throw line and just leap and stuff, which under the old rules would have been legal.
We would play a team like Oklahoma State, and they might pass the ball 40, 45 times before they'd attempt a shot, realizing that anytime you ran with the team that Wilt was on, that you're probably going to get blown out pretty good.
He was too nice a man. I can't tell you how many times I watched him go up for a dunk, and someone would put their hand within the cylinder trying to block a shot, and Wilt would let up because he knew he could break the man's arm.
He could not be guarded. He could not be defended. He could not be thwarted. He was the greatest physical specimen that anybody has ever seen on a basketball court. And one guy had his number. One guy was David to his Goliath. One guy, Bill Russell.
The only difference between the two of them was the fire in the belly.
If he had 1/3 of Russ's intensity, God, he would have been even more awesome than he was.
Just to be very honest with you, Boston probably had a better team than we did. You know, there's always talk of Wilt versus Russell and Russell beat Wilt, etc. That's not true. Russell didn't beat Wilt. Boston beat Philly.
In 1966, the 76ers head coach, Alex Hannum, convinced the 30-year-old Chamberlain that in order to win an NBA title, he would have to rebuild his game from the ground up.
Never in the history of sport has a player of Wilt's magnitude been asked
to change what he has done so well for so many years for the betterment of the team.
Wilt just looked around and saw the talent on that team and realized that these players would perform better the more they were involved in the play rather than Wilt doing everything.
He was assisting more, he was rebounding more, he was playing better defense, the whole bit.
He beats Russell fair and square one time when it mattered in 1967 when he had his finest year, the most balanced year a man could have, 24 points a game, 24 rebounds a game, and 8 assists a game for a team that wins 68 games. They blow out the Celtics in 5 games.
We're in New York to play the Knicks, and he asked me up to his suite. But I wasn't there 2 or 3 minutes, and here comes room service with 4 entrees. I said, gee, Wilt, I've already eaten. He said, no, my man, these are all for me.
Who knows the game of basketball could possibly, in my mind, ever pick anyone other than Wilt Chamberlain as the greatest all-around center to play the game of basketball. Bill Russell you would pick as far as the greatest impact on a team and their success as far as winning championships. But if you took all of the skills that are required to play the center position in the game of professional basketball, no one center could do as many things as Wilt did and do them so magnificently.
Kind of feeling sorry for myself, and I'm standing over the sidelines, and I'm huffing and I'm puffing, and I'm thinking, man, maybe I just can't play at this level. At that exact moment, I feel this large hand on my shoulder. I turn around. It's Wilt Chamberlain, arguably the greatest basketball player who ever lived. Wilt had retired from the NBA a few years earlier, and every afternoon would come down and watch the younger players work out. Wilt grabbed me by the shoulder, spun me around, looked me in the eye, and he said, "First of all, young fella, you are never going to catch that man." I said, "Thanks, Wilt. I already figured that out." And he said, "More importantly, it's not your job." He said, "Come with me." Wilt grabbed me by the arm, took me out on the floor, positioned me right in front of the basket. He said, "You see this basket? Your job is to stop players from getting there. Your job is to make them miss their shot, get the rebound, throw it up to the guard, let them go down the other end and score it, and your job is to cruise up to half court and see what's going on." I like this part. He said, "I've been watching you the past few days, and I see the skill you have at defense. This is what you need to concentrate on. This is what you need to focus on." When Wilt shared that with me, everything changed. I understood what I needed to do. I understood what I could be great at, and it took a Wilt Chamberlain to see it. And I went on to become one of the great defensive players in the NBA. 4 years later, that 5-minute conversation took me to breaking the NBA record for the most blocked shots in a single year, 456, which is still the NBA record today. That 5-minute conversation took me to a 12-year NBA career, being named Defensive Player of the Year twice. And in 1989, I was named an All-Star.
I don't think anyone's getting 20,000 rebounds again. I'm going to say I think you and Wilt were the only two. I think that's it.
He called me up one day. Sports Illustrated had a cover and said, "Is Dennis Rodman the best rebounder ever?"
Oh, God.
And Wilt was so annoyed. And I cleaned it up saying annoyed. So he calls me up and he asked me, did I believe this bleep? And so I said, I don't pay attention to that. He says, I had more rebounds a quarter than he had a whole game.
Winning is only important if you beat the best. My friend Wilt, Norman Chamberlain, was far and away the best player I've ever played against.
The man has 11 rings and 10 fingers. Now, I asked him, "Hey, Bill, why not let me have one of those rings that you can't wear?" You understand? You know, and he gave me that cackle of his. So I said, "Well, maybe I'll give you a finger then." So I gave him the old finger. So he can have a chance to use that 11th ring he has.
I think some of our best games were played at the Rucker tournament. Every ball player, whether it was the guys from California or the guys from New York, and either NBA ball players, they would play all the time in this Rucker tournament. And I remember there was a game against Brooklyn. I played with Brooklyn, and Wilt played with the team from Philly. And we had this game against them, and it was probably one of the best games you've ever seen. But everybody don't remember it because it wasn't on video. It was pre-video. So, I mean, it was a great game. And I think that Wilt, and we had a guy by the name of Jackie Jackson, who was like 6'4" and can actually touch the top of the backboard. I've heard people talk about guys touching the backboard. This guy can do it. And we ran a play, and Wilt used to shoot this fadeaway jump shot. He used to go up high and shoot it off the glass. So we had a play that we would make Wilt shoot this jump shot, and Jackie would come over and block it. And we had the play set up perfect. Wilt went in and turned, shot his jump shot. Jackie came from the weak side and caught it right at the top of the backboard. And the crowd went crazy. People were running around the place and jumping off the fence and almost jumping off the ceilings and stuff. And it was just phenomenal. And we looked over at Wilt, and Wilt was staring at us, and Wilt called timeout. Just called timeout like that. And everybody was still running around screaming. And back then, there wasn't high fives. They had to give everybody low fives and stuff. Everybody was clapping and carrying on. And then the next 15 plays were dunks by Wilt that I've never seen before in my life. He dunked every single way it can be imaginable. Wilt used to have a club called Small's Paradise in Harlem, and after the games were over with, all of us would go over to Small's Paradise. And back then, none of the guys had any money, so Wilt would always let us in, let us get into the back and give us something to eat and buy us food and talk to us and gave us information. And he was one of my mentors, and he always told me what to do and what not to do.
And the other thing is, Wilt tried to come out of the game before he got to 100 points because the game was won. And many people say, well, he was trying to rub it in. He was not trying to rub it in. But Frank McGuire had made a pact with Wilt that we didn't know about. Maybe Tom knew about it. And he told Wilt he was going to average 50 points that year, which he did. And we didn't know about it. And then he also acted like he didn't know Wilt when Wilt was trying to come out of the game. He kept looking away from him. And Wilt was tired and wanted to come out of the game because I don't know if you remember this, Tom, but they didn't get rooms for us back then. And no. And it wasn't like the NBA is today. So we were just kind of walking around aimlessly in
There's a
the
hallway
city,
in the back.
and a hallway in the back.
Hallway in the back.
And Wilt was actually
water fountains
playing. Went to a penny arcade, and he was shooting the gun. And he told me afterwards. He said that he was really hot. He said that he was, mowing everything down. And I told him, yeah, but you mowed a lot of things down in the game tonight, too. But he actually tried to come out of the game, and he was not trying to rub it in. So, but Frank had made a pact with Wilt. Maybe Tom knew about this, but I didn't. He made a pact with Wilt that he was going to average 50 points. The other thing that happened with Wilt, and I don't know if Tom knew this, but he came up with Willie Knowles and Johnny Green. And Wilt said that he had to sit in the back of the car, and he acted like he was asleep the whole time going back to New York because he said they threatened to throw him out the car at some point coming down from Pennsylvania. So it was just a great time. And for those of us who knew him and knew him well, it was just a great thrill for me to be a part of it.
Tell me a little bit about when you...
People have, this skewed view of him. And I can tell some stories of things that he did off the floor and on the floor. But when you talk about great players, it's hard for people to fathom what he did on a basketball court. It really is. But, I've often said if you take 10 things and say there are 10 things that you need to be a great player, and if you do 9 of them, I think you're pretty darn good. So the one that they'd always look at is, well, he doesn't shoot free throws well. Except that night he made 28 out of 32, which is pretty good, I think. So, I struggle when people say, well, who did he score 100 points again? I don't care who he scored 100 points again. To score 100 points in an NBA basketball game, you're pretty good. You're pretty good. And, I can tell stories about him, unrelated to basketball, things that he did that people have a hard time believing because it bothers me when I tell people something about him. They say, well, you're saying that because you was his friend. And so it's telling me I can't be objective about a friend. But, when you talk about playing basketball, which was a part of what he did, and some of the other things he did, it was just a pleasure to be a friend and to be on the same court with him. I don't know if Tom remembered this, but we had these locker room, the old locker rooms where we were sitting, and Wilt was sitting next to me, and he used to sweat profusely, and he's reading the stat sheet. And, Guy and Tom and myself and a few of us, we were very, very happy that, he scored 100 points.
And he was the only guy who had this down look on his face. And I'm wondering, I said, big fella, what's the matter? What are you upset about? He said, well, I never thought I'd take 60 shots in a ball game. And we, in my infinite wisdom, said, yeah, but you made 36 of them, so we'll take that any day of the week. But, you know, for those of us who had an opportunity to play with him and know him as a person, I just can't say enough great things about him.
I describe Wilt, and I mean this sincerely, as one of the world's great athletes. And I'm talking about in the history of time.
A lot of people don't realize that when Wilt came to the Lakers, it was West and Baylor and Goodrich and a lot of good players there, that he actually, I mean, he really did sacrifice. When I was there playing with Wilt, I mean, he would take 15 shots, 12 shots, 10 shots, average, 21 points, get 27 rebounds, and, West and Goodrich were getting, 48 between them in the backcourt, and he didn't care. He just wanted to win. And I think the year we won the championship, I don't think there's any doubt that the difference was Wilt.
Well, in baseball, they talk about a five-tool player, and all the skills. So if you're breaking down Wilt to someone who had never seen him play, this guy could run.
Right.
He was huge.
Yes.
He was athletic. He could shoot the ball because the fadeaway bank shot was in part of his repertoire. Could he handle the basketball?
Well, he played with the Trotters. And if you play with the Trotters, you learn. He could go through the reams and he could do some things, but he didn't do them in the regular season, during the regular games, but he could handle the ball. And by the fact that he led the league in assists later on, showed he could pass the basketball. So Wilt had all the tools of any player. He didn't display them all the time because he was asked to do other things.
Wilt averaged just under 23 rebounds a game, and one year he averaged 27.2 rebounds per game. And Russell, beat him in those championships. But to go against Bill Russell, the great defender, and get 55 rebounds, so people say, well, he probably, they didn't have the big centers, they didn't have the good ones in those days. He wouldn't do that today. Yeah, he did it against Bill Russell. It's documented. It's there.
Sense of humor? Was he braggadocio? I know that he used to get into arguments. There's 10,000 lakes in Minnesota. There's this many people in this country. He was a world scholar. He wanted to know everything. Claimed he did, put it that way.
Very competitive in anything he did. I don't care what it was. It was shooting marbles. He'd tell you, I can shoot a marble better than you, and it will only go 15 feet. And say, well, there's only 12 feet here, but I'll make it go 15 because I'll make it go around a corner and come back in. And then you say, wait a minute, you can't do that. He said, well, I'll bet you. And I said, well, how much you want to bet? He said, I'll bet you $10,000. I said, well, I'm only making $5,500. I can't bet you $10,000. But that's the way he was. He was very, and he'd walk past you and he'd say, what's the capital of Ohio? You go, start thinking about it. Boom. You go, you're wrong. You're wrong. And here's what he'd always do. And his sister and I talked about this. If he was wrong, he would never say, I'm wrong. What he would always say is, you might be right. But he would never say, I'm wrong. And that's the way he was.
One of his family friends who came back for the celebration of retirement of his number said that he always cheated in cards. And I wondered, did you ever play cards with him?
No, never played cards with him.
Did you ever hear that?
Oh, sure. He'd always try to, do things and try, he had big hands and he'd try to do little things and try to trick you. And then he'd go, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. Throw it away. But I can remember things that he did where he would just never admit that he was wrong. I remember one time we were flying over after a game, DC-3, and it's late at night and you can't see. And all you can do is see lights out. And so the pilot comes on and says, we're going over Toledo, Ohio. And he says, how many people in Toledo, Ohio? I said, I don't know, Wilt. I'm not a census taker. I said, 357,000. He said, you're wrong, 356,999. I said, wait a minute, big fella. No, you can't do this to me. He said, I'll bet you. I said, okay, how much you want to bet? $10,000. So he said, so in other words, I'm right, because you can't bet. I said, right, you got it, big fella. That's the way he was, very competitive man.
The first time I got a chance to play against him as a rookie, he was kind of like a hero to me because I watched him so much. And I went to shake his hand. The first time I went to play against him, he wouldn't shake my hand. And they tipped the ball up. He puts his elbow on my shoulder, tips the basketball away. And I couldn't figure, why is my hero doing this to me? You know what I'm saying? And because I hadn't earned any kudos with him, I hadn't earned his respect. It took me 2 years of working hard and busting my butt, working on my jump shot, working on my passes, trying to be a better team player, that I got and earned the right to play with, my contemporaries that were the great players of the day. And that was the first time he came up to me at that dinner and said, "Big Bob, welcome to the NBA." And it made me feel, I don't care if I played at all, you know, but I was finally accepted, you know, by the great players in the game. And that's what was very important to me.
Rick, I know you hate questions like this, so I can't resist asking you one. If you have one player in NBA history that you could start a team around, who would it be?
I don't hate questions like that. It would be Wilt Chamberlain.
Why?
He's the greatest big man in the history of the game. And you win with big men. And Wilt would adapt his game accordingly. If Wilt had the good fortune of having as many great teammates as Bill Russell had, I think that his record of championships would have been phenomenal. If you look and you see what he accomplished when he was surrounded by great people, the '67 Sixer team, everybody talks about that being maybe one of the greatest teams ever. And what happened? Wilt helped them win a championship because he had great personnel. Then, when he was even older, he played on the Lakers team, and they set the record for consecutive wins. Won championship. I mean, why? Because Wilt was willing to do whatever is necessary. Heck, he led the league in assists one time as a center. This guy was a phenomenon. I mean, 50 points a game for an entire season, guys. I don't know if people have an idea just how crazy that is. I mean, I played the game and scored like 36 or 7, thinking I have to score 12, 13, 14 more points a game for 80-something games. It's insane. 22 and a half rebounds a game average for a season. The guy was the most dominant force ever.
What do you remember about seeing Wilt Chamberlain in Kansas?
Oh, we used to drive down there. Well, actually, we drove down to Kansas City because they had a tournament there. It wasn't really a home game. And what I really remember about Wilt Chamberlain, you remember what they said that he was going to have printed on his gravestone?
No.
At last, I sleep alone. I mean, Wilt was known for several things. Let's put it that way.
If you could have his career or your career?
Well, I've had a lot of fun. I've had a lot of fun.
What's your most prized autograph?
Well, the greatest of all times. He's right here in front of me. Signed a couple of my books for my young children, and I couldn't be happy.
Well, is it true? Would you like to tell Clyde how many points you would score if you played in the game today? How many points do you average?
Well, you got to understand with the rules of the day, with the offense not allowed to touch you, can't come in and put 3 or 4 guys around you when you don't have the ball. Probably about 65 or 70 might be a good thing, you know.
All right, thanks, guys. Back to Dick and Hubie.
That's conservative, I bet.
Yeah. Well, you know what's interesting, Dick? Every time they say the strongest man ever to play the game, is Wilt Chamberlain, probably Artis Gilmer's second. And everyone is unanimous about that. When you look back over a period of time, at one time, Wilt had over 50 offensive records in this league. And there's the guy who didn't do a bad job either. He doesn't have enough fingers to carry all the rings that he
You know, in the days before Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, the Bill Russell-Wilt Chamberlain battle was the one everyone came to see in the 50s and 60s. Kobe Bryant.
Hello everyone, I spend a lot of time trying to get you guys nice videos, so please subscribe to this page, and please subscribe to my second page. The link to my second page is in the description section. Thank you.